9-year-old Erica Nicole Baker was last seen walking a dog near the Kettering Recreational Center on February 7, 1999. Erica's parents were divorced, and she spent most of that day with her father, Greg Baker, in their hometown of Kettering, Ohio. Greg dropped Erica off at the home she shared with her mother, Melissa Baker, around 3 p.m. Erica asked if she could walk her aunt's Shih Tzu dog in Indian Rifle Park, which was close to her home. Erica left the house sometime between 3:30 and 4 p.m. to walk the dog. 2 witnesses saw her sitting on a bench with the dog near the park's pond shortly after 4 p.m. Witnesses later saw the dog dragging its blue leash alone sometime after Erica was last seen. They called animal control to pick up the dog but didn't realize the girl they had seen earlier was Erica until news reports of her disappearance surfaced later that night. Erica's mother reported her missing when she failed to return home later in the evening. An extensive search of the area produced no clues as to her whereabouts. Rode in Germantown, Ohio, several days after she disappeared. Bloodhounds reacted positively to her scent on the clothing, but her family said the shirt did not belong to her. The police received leads that Erica was the fatal victim of a hit-and-run. The occupants of the vehicle had panicked and disposed of her body. Authorities said that they identified 4 suspects in January 2000, 5 months after she disappeared. The tips named Jan Franks, her boyfriend Christian Gabriel, Clifford Butts, and his girlfriend as the passengers. There are many conflicting accounts, but the story Christian gave the police is that the 4 occupants of the van were under the influence of drugs and alcohol and had recently gone on a shoplifting spree, and all had criminal records. They heard a thud and stopped the van to see the body of a girl lying in the middle of the road. They panicked and placed her body in the van. They then took the body to their apartment and proceeded to smoke crack cocaine. They partied for a while and then took her body somewhere else and buried it. There are conflicting stories on whether Jan Franks was the driver or if it was her boyfriend Christian Gabriel. Jan Franks died in February 2001 of a drug overdose, and the recollection of events that night came from Christian Gabriel in February 2004. Frank's attorney, Beth Lewis, has refused to tell the police what Franks told her about Erica's case prior to her death, citing attorney-client confidentiality. Ohio law states that a dead person's spouse can waive attorney-client confidentiality for them, and Frank's husband did just that. However, Frank's attorney has disputed Frank's husband's authority to waive confidentiality and continues to refuse to answer questions despite being held in contempt of court and even being jailed. Many years later, she would finally break her silence and testify to a grand jury, but the testimony was kept secret. In February 2004, just 3 days before the statute of limitations on the offenses would have expired, Christian Gabriel was indicted for evidence tampering and gross abuse of a corpse. The grand jury had the option of indicting him for a range of offenses, such as aggravated murder and vehicular homicide, but they declined to do so. They also refused to indict Clifford Butts, one of the passengers of the van. There is little information available on Clifford Butts and his girlfriend and the amount of participation, if any, in Erica's death. Prosecutors stated they believe Christian was driving the van, which struck and killed Erica on Glengarry Drive near the Kettering Recreation Center, and he buried her body in Cedar Creek State Park to cover up the crime, which is a very large area of land. Many people believe that he said that Jan was the driver because she is no longer alive to defend herself, and he wants to use her as a way to stay out of trouble. Christian led authorities to various places where he said he had buried Erica's body, but nothing was ever discovered in any of the locations, and investigators stated they were not going to search again for her remains unless they found more evidence indicating where she was. Christian pleaded not guilty to the charges and maintains his innocence in Erica's disappearance and has stated his confession was false and he felt pressured by the police to confess and was fed the information. Nevertheless, he was convicted of evidence tampering and gross abuse of a corpse in connection with Erica's case in October 2005 and sentenced to the maximum term of 6 years in prison. He was released from custody in June 2011. Does Christian not remember exactly where they buried her body because they were also wasted? Or has he been purposely deceptive so that her body will not be found and he will not be charged with murder? None of the suspects have ever been charged with murder due to a lack of evidence. Erica's body has never been located, and her family still seeks justice. As of today, her case remains unsolved. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our new channel, where we uncover captivating and chilling cold cases that will keep you on the edge of your seat. You won't want to miss the twists and turns we have in store. Let's continue. On April 24, 1981, a female body was discovered alongside Greenlee Road in Troy, Ohio. The female was found wearing blue jeans and a fringe buckskin jacket with a Native American design. The coroner at the time concluded she died from strangulation and blunt force trauma to the head. Investigators determined she had only been dead a few hours when the body was found. However, they were not able to identify the body, and due to the fringe buckskin jacket she was wearing, they labeled her the Buckskin Girl. In February 2001, the Miami Valley Regional Crime Lab in Ohio was able to generate a DNA profile using the unidentified victim's blood from a sample that had been in storage since 1981. They uploaded the DNA into a public genealogy database. The company they used worked similarly to the way consumer companies such as Ancestry.com work to track a person's lineage. Big companies like Ancestry.com don't allow nonprofits the use of their massive database, which can hold millions of DNA samples. The company they chose had a fraction of the DNA samples. However, a match was found. They were amazed that a match was found, considering the size of the database was so small. Now that they had a sample of DNA from the unidentified female, they were able to generate a sketch of her face, hoping to finally identify the Buckskin Girl. When they released the sketch, they received over 2,000 tips, but all of them led to a dead end. Speculation started swirling around the possibility of a serial killer, but no proof of this was ever found. It would be 17 years after the sketch was first released, but on April 11, 2018, she was finally identified as Marsha King, a 21-year-old girl from Little Rock, Arkansas. The reason they had so much trouble identifying her was that she was never reported missing by her mother. Her mother thought her daughter was alive and would return home one day, and therefore, she kept the same phone number and lived at the same address all these years. To this day, investigators continue to look for King's killer and for the reason King was in Miami County in the first place, which continues to remain a mystery. Maybel Dawson was 68 years old when she was last seen in Jefferson Township, Ohio on January 3, 1998. She was entering her one-bedroom apartment on the second floor of the Martin Luther Manor on Liscombe Drive at approximately 9:30 p.m., wearing a tan jogging suit. No one has seen or heard from Maybel since. Maybel's family and friends became concerned when they could not reach her by January 5th and went to her apartment to check on her. Nothing was out of place in her apartment, and there were no signs of forced entry. One of her winter coats was found draped over a chair, and her pocketbook was found on the table, which contained her wallet, cash, credit cards, and a rent check dated January 8, 1998. Her daughter then reported her missing to the police, stating that it had been 2 days since she last spoke to her. Her bank account was never accessed after her disappearance, and her family says it was uncharacteristic of her to leave without warning, as she had never left or wandered off. Her family said Maybel did not have a car but would often ride the bus. At first, family members thought Maybel left on purpose because she was mad at her family for not letting her live with any of them. Her children declared her legally dead in June 2003. Foul play is suspected in her case because Maybel appears to have left her apartment with the intention of coming back soon. Authorities do not believe she was attacked within her apartment or lured from the premises. Suicide has not been ruled out but has been deemed unlikely. Maybel had recently retired in 1996 from her housekeeping job at Miami Valley Hospital at the time of her disappearance. She had also worked as a key punch operator, an elevator operator, a department store sales clerk, and in a factory, and she had done volunteer work as well. Maybel is described as a loving woman who was close to her family. She was divorced and left behind 2 adult daughters when she vanished. Her case is still being investigated by law enforcement, but as of today, it remains unsolved. Patricia Atkins, or Patty, was last seen leaving work at the Honda of America automotive plant in Marysville, Ohio, where she worked as a supervisor. She clocked out 19 seconds after midnight on June 29, 2001. The plant was set to close for a week because of the upcoming 4th of July holiday. After leaving work that night, she was never heard from again. Patty was a 29-year-old, divorced mother of a 7-year-old daughter, McKaylee, at the time of her disappearance. Patty had been having an affair with a married coworker at the time she went missing. She told her family and friends about the relationship and said he planned to leave his wife to be with her. Despite concerns from her family, Patty reassured them that they had an incredible connection. However, to an outsider, the following details would make the relationship seem very fishy. She had given him approximately $90,000 over at least a 1 to 2 year period, depleting her savings accounts, borrowing against her 401k retirement fund, getting cash advances from her credit cards, and taking out a second mortgage. The money was supposed to be used so that he could buy out his share of his and his wife's jointly owned side business when he divorced her to be with Patty. Patty had told her older sister, Marsha, that he promised to start repaying the money in July after she disappeared. Law enforcement was unable to link any money from Patty to him. It appears that Patty may have given him cash, and he never deposited any of it. Just before her disappearance, Patty told her friends and family she was going on a vacation to Canada in a remote location with him. She put her cats in a kennel and asked her sister to look after her daughter while she was gone. She said he told her they were going to a cabin in a remote area without phones, so she wouldn't be able to call her family. Strangely, he also told her not to pack anything because they would buy whatever she needed once they arrived. Despite his instructions not to take anything, Patty had packed a small, teal-colored duffel bag. She told her friend she had bought blue lingerie at Victoria's Secret. The bag and its contents have never been found. Patty asked a friend to drive her to work the night she disappeared so she could leave to start their vacation. She told her friend that he had to give a coworker a ride home and had told her to hide in the bed of his pickup truck under a truck bed cover until he dropped the other man off. When over a week had gone by and Patty had not returned for her daughter, her sister began calling Patty's home repeatedly, desperate to get in touch with her, but continued to get no answer. She then called his home and his wife answered. She pretended to be a customer and was told that he was not there but was expected back later. A few hours later, Marsha called his home again and was able to speak to him. Apparently, he got very quiet and acted strangely, stating he didn't know what she was talking about and acted as if he barely knew Patty as a coworker. Her family then went to Patty's home and, strangely, found in her closet paper money bands but without any money in them. These money bands were most likely from the money she had been giving him. Marsha then called the boyfriend's wife and told her about the affair and the money that Patty had been giving him. She talked to Marsha, then reported Patty missing on July 8, 2001. Detectives searched the boyfriend's home and his business. His wife told detectives that she didn't believe it was possible for her husband to have been having an affair. While searching the home, detectives found a birthday card from Patty to the boyfriend and a Hard Rock Cafe shirt from Florida that Patty had given him. They also found a letter written by Patty to the boyfriend. When the boyfriend was questioned, he said he and Patty had no plans to go on vacation together. He had never had an affair with her, and he only knew her slightly. He and his coworkers said they left the plant together at midnight, drove 30 miles in the direction of their hometown of Canton, Ohio, stopped at a Burger King restaurant, waited 45 minutes in the drive-thru line, got their food, and got home at 2:30 a.m. The boyfriend's wife backed up their story, saying her husband had, in fact, arrived home at 2:30 a.m., the usual time, and that she didn't know anything about an affair. The Burger King manager, however, said they were never busy in the early hours of the morning and no one would have had to wait more than 10 to 15 minutes in the drive-thru to get their food. The equipment for the bed cover used the night Patty went missing was found on the truck, but the actual cover was found in a storage loft on his property. Police took the truck cover for analysis and found cat hairs on it and a small spot of blood. Patty's veterinarian determined the hair came from her cats, which she had brought to the kennel prior to her shift that day. Law enforcement decided at the time to wait on technological advancements to test the blood because it was such a small amount and they may not get more than one chance to test it. As of today, law enforcement has not released any new information on whether the blood has been tested. The police also searched a newly concreted area on his property that was alerted to buy a cadaver dog but found nothing. He had placed the order for the cover just a few days before Patty's disappearance and had picked it up the same day she disappeared. A week later, he took it off and put it in storage. The truck was usually used as a work truck, and a coworker stated that it would not need a cover because the bed needs to be open to haul equipment. The boyfriend said he used it to cover some fishing gear in his truck bed. It is reported that he normally didn't drive the truck much, but he drove it to work the night Patty disappeared. The boyfriend took a polygraph test about the case and it showed deception. Shortly after Patty disappeared, he quit his job at the Honda plant and never returned to work there. He remains a person of interest but is not officially named a suspect. Therefore, his name is not mentioned in this video. The case has been difficult to solve without a body and without a murder weapon. Patty was declared legally dead in February 2006. Both authorities and her family believe she was the victim of homicide, and as of today, her case remains unsolved. Francisco Bonitez, known as Paco, entered the world on December 13, 1963, in Algeciras, a city in Spain. Growing up alongside his two brothers and one sister, he spent his childhood in a town bordering Morocco. Paco received his education at a Catholic boarding school. When he turned 20, he made a significant move to Seville, where his parents, including his mother, whose occupation remains unknown, and his father, a retired nursing assistant, had settled. In 1986, Paco embarked on a new journey by enlisting in the French Foreign Legion, a branch of the French military with a storied history dating back to 1831. During his service, Paco was assigned to various missions, including deployments to the Persian Gulf and Gabon, where he demonstrated his dedication and valor. In recognition of his service, he was honored with the Cross of War and the Military Medal. In 1988, while stationed at Marseille, Paco's path crossed with Marie-José, or Maria José as he called her, a French woman working in bars near the port he frequented. Maria José was a single mother raising 4 children, each from a different father. Paco and Maria José began dating and soon decided to move in together. Over time, their family expanded, and on May 24, 1994, Maria José and Paco welcomed their first child together, Allison, who became Paco's cherished firstborn daughter. Paco was known for his deep love and protective nature as a father, although he also had a history of infidelity. Around 1998, Paco embarked on a tumultuous relationship with Simone de Oliveira Alves, a young woman of Brazilian origin with 4 children. He met Simone in a club, and for some years, he led a double life with her until their relationship ultimately came to an end in late 2004. Despite Maria José's discovery of Paco's infidelity, she chose to forgive him. More than a decade after Allison's birth, Maria José and Paco decided to formalize their relationship through marriage. Their wedding took place on November 10, 2006. This event marked the occasion when Maria José adopted her husband's last name, and they both endeavored to build a harmonious and contented life together. In 2010, Paco experienced another relocation, this time to the recruitment area of the French Foreign Legion in Perpignan, a city situated in southern France. As of December 2012, troubles began to emerge within the couple's relationship, culminating in their separation. Maria José initiated divorce proceedings, driven by a discovery made by their daughter during the Christmas of 2012. It was during this time that Allison stumbled upon messages of affection exchanged between her father and a new romantic interest named Dolores, a fellow soldier stationed in Perpignan. Learning of Paco's continued infidelity, Maria José confronted him, no longer willing to tolerate his unfaithfulness, which ultimately led to his departure from their home. Despite the challenges in his marriage, Paco continued to engage in romantic pursuits. He parted ways with Dolores when she sought a more committed relationship and subsequently commenced a new affair with a familiar face, compatriot Maria Teresa, who worked as a guard at the French consulate in Barcelona. Meanwhile, as her mother navigated the complexities of divorce proceedings, Allison sought to lead a typical life for a young person her age. At 19, she secured employment at a hair salon and nurtured her interests in modeling and beauty pageants, passions that had taken root in her early years. Allison's educational achievements, kindness, and natural beauty had earned her a coveted spot in a beauty competition scheduled for August 2013. Winning this competition would have opened doors for her, guaranteeing participation in Miss France 2014 and bringing her one step closer to realizing her dream of being crowned the most beautiful woman in her country. However, on July 14, 2013, while the French were celebrating their national holiday, a preparatory meeting for the contestants took place. Surprisingly, Allison did not attend this crucial meeting, causing surprise among her fellow contestants and organizers. From that day onward, neither she nor her mother were heard from again. According to Paco's account, on Sunday the 14th, he had driven his daughter to the pre-contest meeting. Subsequently, he returned to their family home, where he found himself embroiled in an argument with Maria Jose over an electricity bill. Paco stated that he later went back to pick up Allison, and they both returned to their city of residence. Upon their arrival, he discovered that Maria Jose had packed her bags, seemingly preparing to leave the house with her younger daughter, heading toward Toulouse. This was the story Paco shared with anyone seeking news of Allison and Maria Jose. A text message sent from Maria Jose's phone at 5:17 p.m. on that Sunday seemed to corroborate this account. In the message, she informed her eldest daughter, Lydia, that they were going to Toulouse. She found this decision reasonable, given that her sister aspired to work for a renowned cosmetics manufacturer and Maria Jose was also in search of employment in that town. Unfortunately, this was the last communication received from them. Allison was known for her active presence on social media, but on July 14th, shortly before 5 p.m., her Facebook account went silent. Concern began to grow among those closest to her, especially considering her consistent online activity. After multiple unsuccessful attempts to contact them, a family friend eventually reported their disappearance to the police. Initially, authorities argued that since both Maria Jose and Allison were adults, they had the freedom to travel without notifying anyone. However, the pressure from concerned family members eventually led Paco to make the difficult decision to report the disappearance of Maria Jose, aged 53, and Allison, aged 19, on July 25th. This action marked the initiation of a police investigation into their mysterious disappearance. Investigations unveiled unsettling details. Both of their phones had been switched off since July 14th, and no credit card transactions were recorded. Furthermore, there was no trace of the mother and daughter at Toulouse or the Perpignan train station, both logical departure points given that they did not possess a car or driver's licenses for independent travel. Interviews with friends and family firmly ruled out the possibility of them running away, particularly in Allison's case, as she was deeply enthusiastic about her life in Perpignan and her dream of becoming a beauty queen. A delegate from the Miss France committee shared in an interview that participating in the competition had been Allison's dream and she had been highly motivated. She also recounted how Allison would frequently call for advice on what to wear in the days leading up to events. Additionally, she emphasized Allison's punctuality and her habit of notifying them if she was running late, making her sudden absence without explanation all the more perplexing. The investigation naturally focused on Paco, as he was the last person known to have seen them alive. Compounding his situation, the ongoing issues with his ex-partner and revelations of his double life made him the prime suspect. Media coverage of the case intensified, and the French public became engrossed in the unfolding mystery. Journalists crowded the street where the family's house was located, and passers-by didn't hesitate to direct accusations at Paco. On August 5th, 3 weeks after the disappearance of his ex-wife and daughter, 50-year-old Paco was tragically discovered deceased. He had taken his own life by hanging himself in the barracks of the Foreign Legion, where he worked as a recruitment officer. Forensic experts determined that his death occurred between 5 and 7 in the morning of that fateful day. Following Paco's tragic death, a series of emails and letters addressed to coworkers and family members came to light, along with a final video that was published on the website of a French magazine. In these messages, Paco expressed his enduring love for his wife and daughter, emphasizing that the burden of suspicion had pushed him to take his own life. One of Paco's last lovers recounted that he had vehemently maintained his innocence and couldn't bear the weight of being viewed as the prime suspect in a crime against his daughter and former wife. French media initially reported that Paco's suicide was driven by overwhelming guilt. However, Maria José's brother conveyed a different perspective when he spoke to journalists. He did not believe that his brother-in-law had harmed his family or played a role in their disappearance. He described the last time he had seen Paco on Sunday, August 4th, as a moment when Paco appeared utterly broken. Paco had described himself as a man of honor but with nothing left to lose. During that interaction, he also shared his suspicion that his sister had left their home in a fit of anger and might be in a place where she couldn't easily return due to the scandal surrounding her disappearance. These statements introduced doubt about Paco's guilt and even stirred feelings of sympathy and compassion for the deceased legionnaire. However, the same video and news of Paco's death brought forth a revelation that altered the course of the narrative. This revelation harkened back to February 2004 and pertained to Simone, the woman with whom Paco had led a double life. It emerged that upon learning of Paco's death through the news, Simone's relatives recognized him and promptly contacted the authorities. They revealed that Paco had been Simone's lover for 6 years until her inexplicable disappearance. In connection to this, one of Simone's sisters disclosed that shortly before vanishing, Simone had been hospitalized due to either a spontaneous abortion or an attempted suicide following a violent altercation with Paco. This fight reportedly occurred because Simone had discovered that Paco had not yet separated from his wife, Maria José. Tragically, Simone never reappeared, and Paco moved on with his life. As investigators compared both cases, they noted some striking similarities. Firstly, in both cases, the last sign of life from the women involved was a text message sent from their phones, Simone informing Paco that she was leaving, and Maria José sending a message to one of her daughters. These parallels raised questions and added a layer of complexity to the mystery surrounding the disappearances. Another notable similarity in both cases relates to the delay in reporting the disappearances by Paco. In November 2004, he waited for several days before reporting Simone's disappearance to the police, a pattern that raised suspicion even though he could no longer be prosecuted for the crimes committed. In late September 2013, a report raised disturbing questions. It was revealed that in mid-July, Paco had purchased a significant quantity of lye, a chemical known for its ability to degrade DNA, making it challenging for forensic experts to detect traces of cleaned blood at a crime scene. During meticulous forensic examinations, officials from the crime lab discovered compelling evidence of a substantial blood spill that had been meticulously cleaned, both in the residence where Maria José and Allison lived and in the barracks where Paco worked. Specifically, blood was confirmed to be present in the drainage of a freezer. A fellow soldier recounted that on July 17th, he had assisted Paco in transporting this freezer from his home to the Legion's headquarters. The same witness informed the police that he had seen traces of blood in a clogged sink within Paco's apartment. Moreover, officials found indications of blood in the room that Paco occupied within the barracks and within a washing machine where he had been observed washing sheets and clothing. Other unsettling details centered around the alleged disappearance of approximately 30 bed sheets from the military installation in July. Additionally, there were reports of a soldier who had witnessed Paco using a hose to clean a carpet from which a reddish liquid was emerging, a situation the man had explained as a result of staining while defrosting meat. Despite the high hopes generated by these revelations, the police faced difficulties in conclusively establishing the connection between Allison's DNA and the traces of washed blood or determining whether it resulted from the young girl's contact with the analyzed items. However, her mother's blood DNA was found in the family washing machine. The neighbors also recalled Paco switching his vehicle from a white car to a dark van around the time of their disappearance. The van was subsequently seized by the police for further examination, although initial tests did not yield any immediate results. Nevertheless, the introduction of this new evidence into the case file only served to intensify suspicions of criminal involvement by Paco. As discussions surrounding Paco's possible connection to the disappearances gained momentum, reactions from those who knew the family were swift. Allison's former boss expressed how the entire community was deeply shaken by the unfolding story. Allison had been a beloved and dedicated employee at the hair salon, and her absence had a profound impact on the clientele. To them, it was inconceivable that her father could be linked to her disappearance. An unnamed family member told French media that Allison had been actively trying to understand the true nature of Paco. She questioned why her affectionate father was frequently absent, including during holidays like Christmas. She even harbored suspicions that her father might have had a double life with another family elsewhere and was possibly tracking one of his lovers on the internet. These revelations added layers of complexity and intrigue to the already perplexing case. Maria Jose's brother, whom we've mentioned previously, shared the ongoing anguish that his family endured 5 months after that fateful July 14th. He revealed that their desperation had not subsided since the beginning of the ordeal. He described how his life had come to a standstill, often disrupted by sleepless nights where he would turn to his computer in search of answers. He also expressed deep concern for his nephews, Maria Jose's other children, who had essentially been raised by Paco and affectionately referred to him as Dad. In contrast to his initial impressions after the disappearances, he stated that all the elements of the investigation seemed to point toward Paco as the primary suspect in the eyes of his family. However, he acknowledged that the evidence incriminating Paco was not sufficient to definitively prove that he had murdered Maria Jose and Allison. On the other hand, he remained open to the possibility that Paco might have had an accomplice. This theory arose from the last message allegedly sent by Maria Jose, which was written in impeccable French. He believed it couldn't have been Paco's work, as he struggled with the French language and had poor writing skills. He emphasized that at times when he communicated with Paco, he even had to ask him to rewrite sentences because they were incomprehensible. He vividly remembered Paco as a fiercely protective father who had never exhibited any signs of violence, making it inconceivable to him that Paco could harm his own daughter. He recounted that on the night before Paco took his own life, they spent 2 hours with him, and he appeared utterly devastated, continuously mentioning that he was going to do something reckless. Later that evening, Paco went to have dinner with one of his military colleagues, and when he called him again an hour later, Paco seemed calm. What struck him as very strange was the fact that he had to learn about the disappearances through television on August 1st. In the midst of the turmoil, he reached out to Paco, who explained the disappearance and the supposed journey undertaken by Maria Jose and Allison. Paco reminded him that Maria Jose had left their home for 4 days on a prior occasion. Additionally, Paco apologized for not being in touch and claimed to have lost his contacts. 1 year after Allison and her mother's inexplicable disappearance, the judge in charge met with Maria Jose's brother, who had become the main civil party involved in the perplexing case. In that conversation, Maria Jose's brother was informed that investigations were still ongoing, reigniting a glimmer of hope that someday they might uncover the truth. Following this meeting, Maria Jose's brother candidly admitted that he woke up every morning with the hope of receiving a call informing him that they had been found. Although he had become more cautious and less optimistic over time, he underscored the importance of discovering the whole truth. He had become convinced of Paco's involvement in his family member's disappearance when Maria's DNA was found in the washing machine. He acknowledged that his life had essentially come to a halt since his sister and niece vanished. He dedicated all his time to collecting, comparing, and assembling evidence, driven by an unwavering determination to uncover the truth. Almost 3 years after the mysterious disappearances, it appeared that definitive evidence was within reach, though investigators exercised caution in their pursuit of the truth. During that time, bone fragments were discovered on a secluded beach. The seemingly human bones were stumbled upon by none other than Maria Jose's own brother, who found them inside a plastic bag. He swiftly arrived at the scene after receiving a tip from a witness and immediately alerted the authorities. 5 investigators from the judicial police were tasked with conducting excavations, with the presence of a forensic doctor who played a crucial role in extracting the bones. The discovery prompted the investigation to determine the causes of death. The police announced that DNA analysis would be conducted in the following days, but the expected resolution did not materialize. The family's lawyer held a strong belief that these remains belonged to the 2 missing women. His conviction was grounded in the fact that shortly after their disappearance, It was determined through the location data of his cell phone that Paco had been in close proximity to the location where the bones were discovered. Indeed, in the months that followed July 2013, exhaustive searches had been carried out in that expansive sandy area, all to no avail. The most recent information regarding this enigmatic case dates back to the year 2021, indicating that the bodies of Maria and Allison had still not been located. The family's lawyer, in his assessment, contended that the case had been mishandled from the very beginning. He explained that the initial hours and days are crucial in solving a crime, and therefore, the delayed reports significantly impeded the investigation. In his view, the prospects of unraveling the mystery surrounding the disappearance of Maria Jose and Allison might have extinguished on the same day Paco took his own life, carrying all his secrets to the grave. Ashley Morris Mollis was born on March 1, 1986 and lived in Muncie, Indiana. She visited her parents in Royerton, Indiana on September 19, 2013. She took her newborn daughter and had dinner with her parents. Her father, Don, noted she seemed slightly worried, but nothing else appeared out of the ordinary. On September 22nd, Ashley attended a family reunion, and this is the last time her family saw her. She was the mother of 3 when she disappeared at the age of 28. At the time of her disappearance, Ashley was separated from her husband and began seeing 62-year-old married man, Daniel York Sr., a mechanic whom she'd met in 2012 when she needed her car serviced. He lent her a vehicle to drive and gave her a rental house to live in. The two began having an affair, and Ashley became pregnant with a baby girl and gave birth just a short period of time prior to her disappearance. The baby Ashley gave birth to was supposedly Daniel Sr., although her paternity had not been verified. It's unclear whether his wife was aware of their affair at the time. Daniel Sr. is described as a manipulator that had a liking to younger women. A few days after the family reunion, Ashley's father and brother were unable to reach her on her phone. Her parents drove to her home and found it locked, and Ashley was nowhere to be found. They left a note on the door asking her to contact them. After a few days passed with no call from Ashley, her parents went back to the house to check on her. The note that they had left was gone. They left a second note in its place and called Daniel Sr. to ask if he knew where she was. He told her parents that she had left to go out of state 2 weeks prior. She had left her sons with her husband and her baby daughter with Daniel and his wife. Her parents then immediately reported her missing because they knew something was not right. Her loved ones don't believe she would have walked out of their life and abandoned her 3 children, all who were under the age of 5. After her disappearance, Ashley's estranged husband petitioned the courts for an emergency custody hearing and gained full custody of both their sons and was granted a divorce. Within a short period of time after Ashley's disappearance, several things had occurred. Daniel Sr. was seen packing up some of Ashley's things at her home and loading them into a truck. It's also believed that Daniel Sr. enlisted his son and possibly his daughter to assist. All the items they took are reported to have been disposed of. Strangely, Daniel's son, Daniel York Jr., had choked on a hamburger in the Yorks' home and passed away shortly after Ashley's disappearance. However, before this happened, Daniel Jr. had supposedly revealed some details pertaining to Ashley's disappearance. When an autopsy was done, they found massive amounts of alcohol in his system that would have been enough to kill him, but they also found a mixture of potent narcotics. It is also reported that he was going through some legal troubles that could potentially cost the family lots of money. You have to wonder if the family saw Daniel Jr. as a liability and his passing was no accident. It is reported that there were several discrepancies in Daniel Sr.'s story regarding Ashley's disappearance. So why wasn't he looked into further? It turns out that he had a cousin, Michael Scroggins, who was a sheriff with the Delaware County Sheriff's Department at the time of Ashley's disappearance. It would appear his cousin might have prevented Daniel Sr. from being looked at thoroughly. Michael Scroggins passed away unexpectedly on May 1535, 1 week after having shoulder surgery. According to reports, he was at his girlfriend's house when he got up in the morning and fell and then died shortly after that. That same year, Daniel Sr. would pass away on September 15, 2015 of a heart attack. Was this family full of bad luck and tragedy, or were more suspicious acts at play here? Before Daniel Sr.'s death, his wife, Sheila, and him had moved to Florida, taking the baby girl with them. After his death, his wife manipulated the legal system in Florida so that she could adopt the baby girl without any consideration given to Ashley's parents. Her parents have not been able to see or contact their granddaughter, nor were they given the option for legal custody, although they are her legal biological grandparents. Interestingly, Daniel Sr. was also considered a person of interest in the death of 22-year-old Heather Music, whose body was found in a burned-out hotel room at the Budget Inn in Daleville, Indiana on November 17, 2010. Daniel had rented the room, and after his initial police interview, he lawyered up and refused to speak with investigators any further. He was never charged in her case, and her murder remains unsolved, and he was also never charged with Ashley's disappearance. Understandably, the families are frustrated and want answers. They want to give Ashley a proper burial, as she is believed to be deceased. They also want their granddaughter in their lives and for her to grow up with her family. Her family will not give up on getting justice, and as of today, the case remains unsolved. Shannon Marie Cheryl was 6 years old when she went missing on October 15, 1986. She was last seen in her yard at 600 Plum Street in Thorntown, Indiana. Around 1:30 p.m., she was outside playing hide and seek with about 10 other children. Shannon went behind the family's mobile home and has never been seen again. Nobody saw her leave the yard, nor did anyone see or hear anything. Shannon lived in a mobile home park with her mom Dorothy Cheryl and younger brother David. She was a kindergarten student at Thorntown Elementary School. At the time that she went missing, she was an extremely shy child. She was wearing a white or yellow sundress with a blue trim, but had no socks or shoes on. Police searched for her using canine bloodhounds, which did catch Shannon's scent, and followed it to a nearby cornfield and a cemetery. But unfortunately, they lost her trail. When Shannon went missing, we didn't have Amber Alerts, social media, or DNA testing, and officers had less well-developed training in child abduction cases than they do now. In February 2009, authorities announced a possible break in the case. A convicted serial child killer and rapist, David Elliott Penton, became a person of interest in Shannon's disappearance. But detectives have not been able to directly link him to Shannon's case. He is currently serving a life sentence for murdering a 9-year-old Ohio girl. Although he stopped cooperating with police, he has made a claim to tell all before he dies. However, to this day, he has never been charged in Shannon's case. There is no evidence that Shannon was taken away by car. Nobody mentioned hearing or seeing a car near the yard. A search party consisting of around 200 police and volunteers went door to door that night and searched fields in the rural community. In a strange and sad twist in the case, a Topeka, Kansas woman named Donna Lynette Walker claimed to be Shannon in July 2003. She telephoned and emailed the family, sending them photographs of herself and claiming to be the missing girl. Shannon's loved ones initially believed her and became very excited about the possibility, but the claim turned out to be a cruel hoax. Donna was charged with a dozen felony counts of identity deception and false informing. She did plead guilty to the charges in April 2004, but claimed she was mentally ill. Her attorney has said in past interviews that Donna was mentally ill and she believed she was helping the Cheryls. She received a sentence of 18 months in prison for attempted identity deception and misdemeanor false reporting. Donna served just 9 of the 18 months in prison before she was released on probation. In February 2006, Jeffrey L. Sunnycab became a suspect because he sent a letter to the Thornton police about Shannon's disappearance, claiming to have information on her case. Jeffrey was convicted of raping 2 children and sentenced to 50 years in prison. He has a reputation for providing credible information on unsolved murders and had provided tips that led investigators to a suspected serial killer, which they were able to indict for his crimes. Authorities have stated they plan to interview Jeffrey and find out what, if anything, he knows about Shannon's case. It is unknown if this interview ever occurred. The child's parents have criticized the police for allegedly failing to adequately follow up on leads and failing to keep the family informed of the investigation. Her mom, Dorothy, and her dad, Mike, both passed polygraph tests and are not considered suspects in the case. They have also given their DNA, hoping it will help find Shannon. As of today, this case remains unsolved. Lisa Copanakis was born September 9, 1965 and graduated from Portage High School in 1984. In 1989, Lisa was 23 years old and in her final semester at the Indiana University North, where she was finishing her accounting degree. She was also eager to start her life with her new husband, George Copanakis. The couple had married on August 21, 1988. Shortly after getting married, George moved into Lisa's small apartment at 5180 Plaza Avenue in Portage, Indiana. On Easter Day in 1989, Lisa and George came home to find their apartment's patio door had been forced open. They entered the apartment to find that their two small terrier dogs had been brutally slaughtered. Someone had stabbed the dogs repeatedly, slashed their throats, and had thrown a rug over top of them. The apartment had been torn apart, but nothing appeared to have been taken. The couple notified police and the story was featured as the Crime Stoppers Crime of the Week. Unfortunately, no one came forward with information about the crime. 2 months after the deaths of their beloved dogs, Lisa and her husband moved into another apartment at the Cherrywood Trace Apartments just a few blocks away. On the evening of August 5, 1989, Lisa's sister-in-law, Nikki Copanakis, attempted to call Lisa several times, and after getting no answer, she became worried. She decided to stop by Lisa's apartment around 4:30 p.m. Nikki knocked on the apartment door, but when no one answered, she asked the apartment manager to let her inside to check on Lisa, and he agreed. Nikki opened the door to find the apartment in complete disarray. As Nikki walked through the apartment, she noticed in the kitchen a large pool of blood leaking out from under a large rug. Nikki lifted the rug to find Lisa's lifeless body beneath it. Lisa had been badly beaten with a blunt object, stabbed multiple times, and her throat had been slashed just as her dogs had been found several months earlier. Investigators believe Lisa was killed sometime between 8:30 p.m. on August 4th and 4:30 a.m. on August 5th. They were only able to lift a single partial fingerprint from inside of Lisa's apartment that didn't belong to George or Lisa. Neighbors were interviewed, but according to them, they didn't see anyone suspicious around the building. They also claimed to have heard no strange noises coming from the couple's apartment the night Lisa was murdered. Lisa's husband George is not considered a suspect as he was away on a work trip in Illinois when the murder took place. It's clear that the similarities between Lisa's murder and the murder of her dogs are no coincidence. But after Lisa was murdered, police wondered if a third unsolved case may be connected as well. 9 years prior to Lisa's death, a man named Gus Raftopoulos was found bludgeoned to death along US 6 in Portage, Indiana. Authorities believe he was beaten with a baseball bat before being thrown from a moving car and ran over. Gus was married to a woman named Demetra, and she was none other than George's aunt. Police reopened Gus's case but never confirmed if the two cases were related. If the killer of the dogs and Lisa are the same person, they would have most likely known the couple had moved only a few blocks away. However, no arrests have been made in this case, and as of today, it remains unsolved. On July 24, 2006, Blake Dickus was finishing up a week spent with his dad Sean and stepmother China. 10-year-old Blake was excited about returning to his mother Christina Dickus that day as she had plans to take him to a movie. China agreed to drop Blake off at his grandmother's, Carol Whitmore's, home. His mother said she would then pick him up from there and take him to the movie. Blake's father, Sean Dickus, had been married to China for just 3 years. The couple had recently returned from a mission trip to El Salvador earlier that summer and had just moved into their new home 1 month prior. According to Sean, China loved Blake as if he were her own, catering to his every need. China also had a good relationship with Christina and would occasionally turn to her for maternal advice. Sean worked only minutes from the home in Franklin, Indiana. On July 24th, Sean arrived at their home on Aberdeen Drive at 12:45 p.m. to have lunch as usual. He left an hour later to return to work. In the meantime, Christina received a phone call from Carol where Christina learned that China failed to drop Blake off as planned. Carol called both China and Sean several times, but there was no answer on either line. Concerned, Christina then drove to the Dickus residence, where she saw several police cars crowding the street. Yellow caution tapes surrounding their home, and worst of all, a coroner's van in their driveway. Earlier, Sean had arrived home from work at 5:14 p.m. that day. Once inside the house, he discovered Blake and China had been murdered. He immediately called the Franklin Police Department. China and Blake were found just feet apart from one another. China had been stabbed multiple times. Blake was also stabbed, but he also had blunt force trauma and had been smothered as well. Suspicion was immediately cast on Sean, as he was the last person to see them alive and the first person to find them dead. However, investigators claim that after extensive questioning, a polygraph exam administered by the FBI, and an alibi that had been confirmed by his co-workers, he was ruled out as a person of interest just 1 month after the murders occurred. At the time of the murders, the Brannigan Woods neighborhood was in a newer subdivision, and construction work took place on a nearly daily basis. However, in the summer months of February 2006 and February 2007, as many as 5 burglaries occurred within a half-mile radius from where Blake and China were murdered, including Brannigan Woods, Oakleaf Manor, Cumberland Commons, and Deer Trace subdivisions. Sean did not know of these burglaries until after the murders had taken place. The same day as the murders, another home on the same street as the couple's was also burglarized. Each break-in had the same hallmarks. A T-shape was cut into a window screen. The burglars were not seeking high-dollar items such as electronics, and often instead took more insignificant items such as food from the fridge, coins, a Tupperware pitcher with lemonade, and a class ring. Every robbery occurred during June and July of February 2006 and 2007 in the daytime, and only Monday through Friday. Investigators told the media when releasing these details that we could very well solve the murders if we could solve these burglaries. There have been hundreds of tips, thousands of interviews have been conducted. Investigators routinely follow up on tips and any leads they receive, and billboards asking for information keep the case fresh in people's minds. A 2x4 with traces of blood on its end was found within the home, but investigators have not publicly stated whether it was left there by the perpetrator or if it had been within the household already. At one point, investigators thought they had a lead in the case when 2 detectives were sent to Florida because an inmate wanted to confess to the crime. Once they got there, they realized he was already doing a life sentence and wanted to be in an Indiana prison with air conditioning. Because investigators have withheld certain information, they were able to determine that he was not a suspect in the investigation. Experts the police have worked with, including the FBI, seasoned homicide detectives, and the VDOC Society, which helps solve crimes, have said that this is likely a local event, meaning this wasn't a serial killer traveling the country. The killer or killers spent time in the area. Franklin Police Detective John Borges would say they may have lived there for a while and could even still live there now. This case continues to be investigated, but as of today, it remains unsolved. Deshawn Swanson, who was also known as Little Man, was a 10-year-old boy in the 4th grade that dreamed of being a basketball player. He was gunned down during a memorial service on September 1935. Deshawn's mother, Shannon Swanson, took 2 of her sons to a home on Graceland Avenue located in the Butler-Tarkington neighborhood in Indianapolis, Indiana, the night of September 19th. They went to pay respects to an elderly woman who previously lived there. Shannon, a mother of 5, said she thought visiting the memorial service with Deshawn and his 11-year-old brother would be a good way to cheer up the woman's family. Just moments after they arrived, around 8:30 p.m., someone opened fire on the house in a drive-by shooting. Deshawn was standing just inside the front door of the home. The shots came from the front and rear seat passengers in a newer model, silver or gray vehicle with the windows tinted. The vehicle was seen slowly driving by the house multiple times prior to the shooting. Though Shannon told her boys to take cover, Deshawn, the youngest of 5, was hit. Shannon says she tried putting pressure on the boy's wounds and yelled for someone to call 911. She also tried to perform CPR. Though an ambulance rushed Deshawn to the local hospital, he did not survive and unfortunately passed away. The shooting injured 3 others, including a 16-year-old boy. He and the other victims, a 36-year-old man and a 56-year-old man, sustained non-fatal injuries to their limbs. The motivation for firing upon the Graceland Avenue home remains unclear, along with whom, if anyone, the shooters were targeting. According to investigators, the home had been the target of a previous narcotics investigation, though officials could not say whether the shooting was connected to that case. Zelma Hutchins, the woman whose memorial service was being held that night, was not listed in police reports as a target of those investigations. Unfortunately, no one has ever been arrested for the death of Deshawn Swanson. Police believe a gang turf war led to the deadly shooting. Deshawn's mom, Shannon, stated in September 2015, "They took someone very special to our family, and they need to turn themselves in, and they need to pay for what they've done to my family." As of today, the case remains unsolved. Maria Cash, the sole daughter in a family of 4 siblings, was a resident of the Barracas neighborhood in Buenos Aires. She was born on December 5, 1981, and enjoyed a blissful childhood with her parents, Federico and Maria del Carmen, along with her brothers Maximo, Patricio, and Santiago. From a tender age, she grasped the significance of friendship when she crossed paths with a girl named Carolina at the age of 6, forging a bond that would endure a lifetime. Subsequently, during their 3rd year of high school, Maria and her best friend Carolina welcomed another addition to their circle, Mariana, who seamlessly became an inseparable part of their group. Maria's social circle was characterized by its quality rather than quantity. Although she maintained amicable relations with her family, she bore the reputation of a rather solitary individual. Even when surrounded by people, she possessed the unique ability to disconnect and revel in solitude. As she matured and gained more independence, whenever she yearned for solitude, she would simply decide to retreat in a coastal city in Argentina known for its pristine beaches, distinctive architectural beauty, and abundant pine forests. Upon arriving, she routinely switched off her cell phone, leaving her friends and family without news of her for several days. Maria developed her talents as a designer and took charge of selling the clothing she crafted. Additionally, she was involved in the sales and promotion of various products. In contrast to her preference for solitude and moments of introspection, Maria displayed a warm and courteous demeanor towards others. Acquaintances frequently remarked on her perpetual smile and serene countenance, making her a delightful presence to be around. Her lively and energetic nature added to her charm. Carolina and Mariana portrayed her as a free spirit with a deep affinity for nature. They emphasized that she lived a modest existence, but consistently extended invitations to dine with her friends and never forgot to mark their birthdays, even if it meant gifting them with a handmade flower. Nevertheless, Carolina also noted Maria's enigmatic side. At some point during her youth, Maria joined a spiritual group, a religious movement centered on self-realization. This pursuit resonated deeply with her, as it provided a platform for meditation exercises aimed at achieving inner peace. While seemingly incongruous to outsiders, this spiritual practice held profound meaning for her, accentuating her inherently spiritual and tranquil disposition. Maria's involvement in the group, along with the enigmatic inner circle she cultivated within the group, remained shrouded in secrecy from her friends and family. Despite its fundamental role in her life, she limited her disclosures to the fact that she dedicated extensive hours to meditation in pursuit of self-awareness. It was within the realms of this group that Maria crossed paths with Juan Pablo, a teacher, proprietor of a restaurant, and government employee in Jujuy. He resided at the picturesque town located 13 kilometers to the north of San Salvador de Jujuy. Over time, Juan Pablo and Maria's friendship deepened to a point where their closeness sparked speculations among both acquaintances and family members. Mariana and Carolina recalled Maria's glowing remarks about him. In late June 2011, Maria confided in her friends, expressing her desire to journey to Jujuy to promote her products, a decision that raised eyebrows, considering the considerable distance and geographical separation from the capital. Maria meticulously orchestrated her trip to Jujuy, veiling the true purpose from everyone, or at least weaving 3 different narratives. She casually mentioned her intention to rest, to sell some of her handmade garments, and even claimed that a friend had extended a job offer at a bar in Huey. During a phone call in the presence of her friends, she cryptically mentioned a job opportunity from a Huey-based friend without divulging further details. She outlined her plans to depart in July and return to Buenos Aires by December. In the days preceding her journey, Maria convened with her friends for a dinner gathering at Mariana's residence. That night, she shared an overwhelming desire to spread the love of God among people. She carried a Bible brimming with highlighted passages marking a newfound religiosity, as per Mariana's recollection. In reference to her voyage to Hugh, Federico Cash, her father, explained that she sought serenity and opted for a destination devoid of the chaos of the capital. She had informed him about a job offer at a friend's bar. On July 4th, Maria commenced her journey and at 7:30 p.m., left her home, packing minimally, indicating her intention to be away for just a few days. Her father, Federico, accompanied her to the bus terminal, where she was set to board a bus destined for San Salvador de Huey, scheduled to arrive around 6 p.m. the following day. Little did he know that it would be the last time he saw her alive. Somewhere along the journey, an event occurred that remained shrouded in ambiguity to this day, lacking clarity in its entirety. What is unequivocal is that on July 5th, Maria made an unexpected decision to disembark in Rosario de la Frontera, a town situated in the province of Salta. This deviation from the plan caught everyone by surprise. In subsequent communications with her family and her friend Juan Pablo, she vaguely alluded to her discomfort with certain fellow passengers, citing an unpleasant experience during the bus ride. However, she refrained from disclosing the true nature of the situation. Standing by the roadside, Maria resorted to hitchhiking and ventured southward until she reached Santiago del Estero. None of these detours aligned with her original itinerary. Nevertheless, after reconnecting with her friend, Juan Pablo, and disclosing her financial predicament, she resolved to resume her journey. He generously offered to purchase her a bus ticket online, enabling her to continue her voyage to Uruguay. Juan Pablo's sister answered the call, informing her that he was occupied with work and couldn't personally pick her up. Instead, she suggested taking a taxi with the assurance that they would cover the fare upon her arrival. Subsequently, all communication with Maria ceased. When Juan Pablo returned home, he found her absent. At approximately 4:30 a.m., he sent her numerous messages urging her to either visit her grandmother's house or one of his own restaurants. He provided detailed addresses and insisted on covering the taxi fare, but received neither a response nor her arrival. Around 2 p.m., the young woman was spotted once more, attempting to hitchhike along Route 34. During that afternoon, she conversed with her family, revealing that she had depleted her funds and was feeling unwell, yet she refrained from divulging further details. On the night of July 6th, she was captured on video passing through a toll booth. Notably, she was without her suitcase but carried a backpack. Remarkably, the same backpack seen in the footage was discovered by toll booth employees who chose to retain it and eventually handed it over to the police several days later. According to some accounts of the case, on July 7th, Maria sought medical attention at a hospital in Salta. However, as the medical examination was about to commence, she opted to depart. Witnesses attested to her appearing disoriented and erratic, as if she lacked a clear sense of direction or purpose. Her overall appearance was somewhat disheveled. Nevertheless, she did manage to consult a pulmonologist in downtown San Salvador de Huey. He charged her 100 pesos for the consultation and prescribed medication for a respiratory issue. In contrast to the descriptions provided by those who encountered her at the hospital, the pulmonologist asserted that she exhibited perfect lucidity, cleanliness, and neatness. These conflicting reports presented a perplexing challenge for investigators. On the same day, July 7th, she embarked on a journey to Salta. A truck driver who had previously seen her in Pampa Blanca, Huey, confirmed encountering her while walking along a street in downtown Salta. Another woman also observed her in the vicinity, seemingly in search of a craft store that included a gym on its upper floor. Around 5 p.m., from an internet cafe in that city, Maria sent an email to her brothers requesting their phone numbers. In the email, she expressed her desire to return to Buenos Aires, citing the loss of her belongings. Regrettably, the communication abruptly terminated, instilling concern within her family. Consequently, they promptly made the decision to report her disappearance, filing a formal complaint at a police station in Salta. Fearing the worst, her father and one of her brothers opted to embark on a car journey to Hogue. Nonetheless, their efforts to locate her proved futile, as she had already moved on from the area. It appears that on July 8th, Maria engaged in an unexpected encounter at the toll booth. She boarded a van driven by a producer and former councilman from the Salta locality. He transported her to the roundabout, where Maria once again solicited a new ride. This time, she succeeded in securing a ride from a truck driver heading to Route 34. Witnesses who encountered her in that vicinity attested to her appearing bewildered and disoriented. She disembarked at a religious pilgrimage site and was spotted in the vicinity of the sanctuary at approximately 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Following this moment, all trace of her vanished. Right from the outset, Maria's family pointed out numerous shortcomings in the investigation. For an initial period of 8 months, the case was categorized as a mere disappearance, with the Salta judicial system overseeing the inquiry. However, in early 2012, Maria's father lodged a report suggesting the possibility of human trafficking. Consequently, the case and its investigation were transferred to the federal prosecutor's office in Salta. The investigation proved to be an intricate puzzle due to the abundance of false leads, some motivated by ill intent and others stemming from genuine concern. Furthermore, Maria's physical description was rather commonplace. A young woman of slender build, average height, with dark hair and eyes. These particulars aligned with the characteristics of countless individuals, resulting in a deluge of incoming calls that ultimately led the investigation astray, as these leads failed to yield any substantive progress. One of the most perplexing aspects that impeded the search was the uncertainty surrounding Maria's intended destination. She underwent 3 transfers across different provinces, introducing an additional layer of complexity. A multitude of lineups, extensive interrogations, consultations, and inspections were conducted, all to no avail. Additionally, 2 extensive search operations were carried out in the region and along Route 34 in an endeavor to eliminate the possibility that she had ventured into the wilderness to spend the night or, alternatively, had fallen victim to a crime along the highway. Speculation even arose that she might have boarded another bus and journeyed to a different region of the country. As the months elapsed, the hypothesis of human trafficking began to wane. Maria's age did not conform to the typical profile sought by human traffickers, who typically target adolescents or significantly younger women. Nevertheless, it was never entirely dismissed, with investigators pivoting their focus toward the potential occurrence of a psychotic episode. Remarkably, in the testimony provided, Maria was portrayed as being poorly dressed, disheveled, and seemingly adrift. She embarked on and disembarked from buses, engaged in hitchhiking, and had even misplaced her identification documents. Contradictorily, Juan Pablo, one of the last individuals to converse with her, recounted that during their telephone exchanges, she exhibited a sense of normalcy, offering no indication of being disconnected from reality or under the influence of substances. There was no discernible sense of fear or urgency in her voice, nor did it seem like she was evading anyone. He emphasized that their conversation flowed like any ordinary exchange between friends. However, he did acknowledge 2 aspects that struck him: her admission of having no money and her decision to head to Hui without confirming his presence there. He described Maria as an exceptional person, noting that he had never known her to grapple with substance dependencies. He expressed astonishment at her sudden visit to Hue because they had lost touch for a considerable period, and out of the blue, she called to inform him of her presence there. Simultaneously with the official investigation, Maria's family pursued their search independently. They frequently voiced their frustration with the sluggish pace of the police investigation and the lack of tangible progress. After her disappearance, they engaged in conversations with numerous truck drivers, shopkeepers, neighbors, and law enforcement officers. Across these cities, they disseminated flyers bearing her photograph and contact information for individuals who might possess pertinent information. It was reported that they gathered more than 4,000 leads, yet the overwhelming majority proved to be either false or malicious. Maria's friend, Juan Pablo, also conducted his own inquiries. They come through police stations, private clinics, public hospitals, and forensic facilities. The police conducted extensive searches and explored numerous theories, yet with time, most of these leads were discounted. Maria's friends even contemplated the possibility that she might have experienced a psychological episode during which she lost self-recognition, track of time, or fell victim to drugging followed by abduction. Nonetheless, these notions remained firmly within the realm of conjecture due to the absence of concrete evidence. Within this context, it is noteworthy that the relentless search conducted by the Cash family did not go unrewarded. While it did not yield Maria's whereabouts, it did lead to the discovery of other women who had fallen prey to criminal organizations engaged in human trafficking. These women had been ensnared in various locations and were ultimately rescued, thanks to the Cash family's endeavors in sharing their stories with the authorities. Amidst this unyielding pursuit, tragedy befell the family once more. In 2014, during one of their numerous journeys across the country in pursuit of any trace or lead, Maria's father tragically lost his life in a traffic accident in La Pampa. He had ventured there to distribute flyers bearing his daughter's visage. Several weeks following his passing, his wife received a phone call that rekindled her determination, faith, and optimism to continue the fight. Pope Francis extended his condolences for her husband's demise, expressing his heartfelt sorrow. In response, she wrote a letter of gratitude, wherein she conveyed how the Holy Father's compassionate words had filled her heart with love and rekindled the faith and hope that had dwindled from her life nearly 3 years earlier, alongside the disappearance of her daughter. Following Maria's father's tragic passing, his children persisted in their quest to locate Maria. Yet, as is often the case in disappearance investigations, they appeared trapped in a labyrinth, devoid of new leads to guide them. Then, in 2018, a significant development emerged when human remains, including a skull, were discovered in the Bolivian city of Oruro. There was hope that these remains might provide answers about the fate of the young designer, and this possibility garnered extensive media coverage. However, subsequent DNA analysis conclusively ruled out any connection to Maria. The Salta judiciary confirmed that the DNA extracted from the recovered remains did not match that of the Cash family, whose samples had been collected in Salta. Consequently, the mystery surrounding Maria's disappearance persisted, much like it did at the outset of the investigation. In that same year, 2018, a woman named Julia came forward, alleging physical abuse and cruel treatment and implicating her ex-husband, a prison guard, in Maria's disappearance. She claimed to have witnessed Maria alive and held captive within a human trafficking network, at least until 2013, 2 years after her initial disappearance. Julia's attorney stated that, according to his client's testimony, these women were confined in a piece of land with rented infrastructure. While this lead was diligently pursued, it too failed to yield the discovery of Maria. The subsequent year, in September 2019, as part of this renewed investigative approach, search operations were conducted in an area known as Las Palomitas in Salta, based on information provided by an anonymous witness. Regrettably, these searches produced no results that could advance the investigation. In November 2020, forensic experts released an updated image of Maria Cash, employing age progression techniques. The intention behind this effort was to assist in her potential identification and to prompt new leads. Maria's family expressed hope that this initiative would yield fruitful results. However, once more, these endeavors proved unfruitful. In a succinct recapitulation of the case's progression in 2023, certain Argentine media outlets revisited the topic of Maria's disappearance. They underscored that during the early years of the search, numerous leads were pursued and a plethora of hypotheses were formulated. However, as time passed, these trails gradually dissipated and the prospects of locating her dwindled. Nonetheless, the authorities remained steadfast in asserting that the search had never been abandoned. Nancy Marlene Snow went missing in November of 1980. She spoke 7 languages, formerly lived in Brazil and West Germany, traveled around the world, and also worked as a talk show host in California. In November of 1980, she lived in Annapolis, Maryland. She had flown back to Maryland from St. Louis, Missouri, where she was temporarily assigned by the Republican National Committee during the Reagan-Bush presidential election campaign. During the election, she was a fundraiser for the campaign to elect Gene McNary for senator. On the evening of November 5, 1980, one day after Ronald Reagan was elected president, she attended a private party in Baltimore. Nancy reportedly spent the night in a hotel in Baltimore after the party was over and had breakfast with the man who hosted the party and whom she had dated during the campaign. The man stated she waited with him in his car until her temporary house sitter picked her up. A witness would report that when her house sitter arrived, he was driving a different type of car than Nancy's turquoise VW convertible. He stated that she told him she planned to drive to Connecticut the next day. However, the family could make no sense of this Connecticut detour because they had been told by Nancy by phone the night before and by letters and postcards that she was exhausted after being on the campaign trail for 2 months and could not wait to get back to her Annapolis apartment and relax and catch up. After getting in the vehicle with her house sitter, she was never seen again. Her house sitter, Paul T. Collins III, who goes by Tom, later stated that he drove her to her Annapolis home and she went out to McGarvey's, a local Irish bar, for a drink. When she returned, she said she met a boat captain named Captain J who told her he was driving to Fort Lauderdale, Florida that night to pick up a yacht and then deliver it to either the Bahamas or U.S. Virgin Islands. Nancy stated Captain J had hired her to help crew the boat and she would be back by Christmas. She told Tom to use her checkbook to pay bills while she was gone. Tom claims he saw her get into a white van and leave, but he could not remember the boat's name, any contact information, or what the captain looked like. Her loved ones found Tom's story very suspicious and stated that she was a devoted mother and a very responsible individual who would be unlikely to leave with a stranger without telling her family where she was going. They said she would also never leave her checkbook in the care of a person she did not know. She called or wrote her daughters every day before her disappearance and would have never left town without calling her family to inform them of such a huge decision. She also left behind the majority of her personal belongings, including her boat shoes, makeup, and jewelry. Tom said she only packed one bag and took $1,000 in cash. When she missed her daughter's 16th birthday, family knew something was very wrong. Her oldest daughter reported her as a missing person in January 1981. Nancy was divorced and her daughters lived with their father. Tom wrote checks to himself and for bills using Nancy's checkbook, forging her signature for 6 months after her disappearance. The total amount was about $10,000. He continued to drive her VW convertible even though he told her family he had put it in storage. It is also reported that he sold all her belongings and all of her files and papers at her home disappeared. After being questioned by the Annapolis police about Nancy's disappearance in October 1981, Tom left the country for the Bahamas in December before he could be questioned by a grand jury. Warrants were issued for his arrest in connection with the thefts. Nancy's disappearance remains unsolved. There has been no activity on her social security number since her disappearance, and she never used her credit cards or withdrew anything from her bank account, although she had inherited a sum of money shortly before her disappearance. She was declared legally dead in 1985, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. Toya Katrina Hill was 8 years old when she went missing from Baltimore, Maryland on March 24, 1982. She lived at the Lafayette Homes, a public housing project in the 200 block of South Spring Street. She came home from school and her mother, Annette Stanley, gave her a snack and permission to play outside. While she was away, Toya left to walk 2 blocks to a store at the corner of Ghost Street and South Carolina Street. She was never supposed to walk to the store by herself. However, she wanted some candy and told her sister she was going even though she wasn't supposed to. According to reports, on March 24, 1982, Toya was spotted at the store speaking with 2 men, one who happened to be her mother's ex-boyfriend. After going to the store, she has never been seen or heard from again. Eventually, the ex-boyfriend and the other man who saw Toya at the store were questioned. Toya was described as a quiet, well-behaved child, and this was the first time she had ever disobeyed her mother's orders. When Annette arrived back home at 7:30 p.m., she discovered her daughter was missing. Annette was set to get married 3 days after Toya's disappearance, and she believed her ex-boyfriend had possibly kidnapped her in an effort to keep her from marrying her new boyfriend. She asked him multiple times about Toya, but he always claimed he didn't know where she was. Annette said she went ahead with her wedding on schedule because she thought her ex-boyfriend might eventually give Toya back. However, that didn't happen, and she would eventually get divorced and marry the ex-boyfriend because she still believed he had something to do with Toya's disappearance. After the two were married, no new information about Toya surfaced, so she left him several months later. He has since reportedly passed away, and if he did have any information on Toya's disappearance, there would be little hope in finding that out now. There is still little information available in Toya's case, but foul play is suspected, and as of today, her case remains unsolved. "25-year-old Miko Loxley was found with a single gunshot wound to the chest in the 5500 block of Harper's Farm Road in Columbia, Maryland around 10:20 p.m. on September 3, 2017. On the night of his death, a person in the area heard a gunshot and would find Miko shot and bleeding. He was rushed to the University of Maryland Shock Trauma Center where he was pronounced dead. Police suspect Miko was targeted, and they don't know at this time if the motive was drug-related or some sort of dispute. Miko previously played football for the University of New Mexico and then Lackawanna College in Pennsylvania. He was working at a Subway store just minutes away from where he was killed. Miko was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder at the age of 22 when he was a senior at Towson. His diagnosis caused hallucinations and symptoms of a mood disorder, such as depression or mania, but could be controlled by medication. His parents state that when Miko took his medication as prescribed, he was better. Mike Loxley, the victim's father, was coaching at the University of Alabama at the time of his son's murder. The last time Mike spoke with his son, Mike was sitting in the tunnel of the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, waiting as players trickled out of the locker room following Alabama's season-opening win over Florida State in September of 2017. After every game, Mike would call and text his 4 children to discuss the football game. Mike would speak to Miko on the phone, not knowing this would be his last conversation with his son ever. Mike and his wife, Kia, returned to Tuscaloosa around 2 a.m. Sunday morning. He would get up later and go into the office where Kia would join him to attend a dinner hosted by Alabama head coach Nick Saban and his wife Terry. After the dinner, around 10 p.m., Mike and Kia would go home and then watch some TV and eventually fall asleep. At around 3 a.m., they heard a knock on their door, and they both got up and rushed to see who it was. Mike looked through the peephole and saw 3 officers from the University of Alabama Police Department. Kia assumed one of the players from the team had gotten into some trouble, but it never crossed her mind the visit might involve one of her own children. Mike would say he had a different, more sickening feeling when he saw the police officers. It was then that the couple learned about the tragedy of their sign. Since the tragedy, they have longed for closure and still seek any information that might bring them one step closer. Investigators say they have been looking at every possible motive, including a possible robbery or the result of an ongoing dispute. But as of today, the case remains unsolved. On August 2, 1981, the U.S. Park Police received an anonymous phone call stating that there was a body lying in the grass alongside of the Baltimore-Washington Parkway in Greenbelt, Maryland. Due to his location found, he has become known as the Greenbelt John Doe. The scenic highway where the body was found extends 29 miles connecting Washington, D.C. to Baltimore, Maryland. The body was wrapped in a blue blanket similar to a hospital blanket. The young man's ankles and his right foot were wrapped in bandages. The man was wearing blue jeans, and near his body was a beige or white medical canvas straitjacket with the letters U.S. on it. The straitjacket found near the body made investigators think he might have been a patient at a local treatment facility. The body was found close to Forest Haven, a live-in facility located in Laurel, Maryland for children and adults with intellectual disabilities. The facility was eventually shut down in 1991 after a lawsuit filed by families of patients and after monitoring by the Department of Justice revealed extensive abuse and problems with the care of its patients. However, Forest Haven was not the only facility nearby. At the time, there was also Spring Grove Mental Hospital, Walter Reed Medical Center, and Crownsville Medical Center. A medical examiner estimated that the John Doe had been dead for several days before being found. He was African American, most likely between the ages 15 and 22 years old, and was very malnourished, weighing only about 106 pounds. The victim had deformed top front teeth. The teeth were very jagged with gaps and appeared severely decayed. One report also noted that he had very long fingernails. In 1981, the Park Police contacted several local hospitals, local and federal law enforcement agencies seeking missing person reports and attempts to identify the victim. They sent fingerprints to the FBI, but nothing matched the unidentified person. In 2011, Park Police Detective Monique Pettit began an investigation into the autopsy photographs, the autopsy report, and a piece of the man's hair. She submitted the hair for DNA testing and uploaded the results into a national DNA database. Detective Pettit has also contacted 52 U.S. states and jurisdictions requesting they search their databases for a match of the John Doe. She has also entered the case into the National Missing and Unidentified Person databases. Many believe that he is James Natalia Foster, who went missing from Steilacoom, Washington in July of 1980. James was born on August 6, 1960, and was 19 years old at the time of his disappearance. However, no definite identification has been made, and as of today, the case remains unsolved. The case of Ron DeCasto. Born in Oregon in 1975, Stephen Nichols lived a mostly private life until the early 2000s. In his mid-20s, Stephen and his first wife, whose identity remains anonymous for safety reasons, moved to China. During their time there in February 2003, she accused him of attempting to suffocate her and throw her off their 8th-floor balcony. Stephen denied these allegations and faced no criminal charges in China. The marriage eventually fell apart, and by February 2005, he returned to the U.S. As a single man. He owned a 3-bedroom condo near Portland, Oregon, which was too large for just one person. This led him to search for a roommate online to occupy one of the empty bedrooms, a decision that would profoundly impact several lives. Julia Simmons, a single mom, took immense pride in her eldest daughter, Rhonda Casto. Rhonda was born on July 2, 1985, in Galveston, Texas, and possessed stunning beauty. Julia's joy was complete with the birth of her second daughter, Melanie, 5 years later. Rhonda's striking beauty and charisma seemed destined to bring her success. During her teen years, she embarked on a modeling career, earning the admiration not only of Julia but also of Jessica Colburn, Julia's best friend from high school. Rhonda was not only photogenic but also had a beauty that ran deeper than mere looks. In February 2005, Julia came across Stephen's online advertisement for a roommate and felt it was a perfect fit. After an initial conversation, she found Stephen to be charming and promptly rented a room in his condo. Moving in, then one day Rhonda, a 20-year-old beauty, showed up at Stephen's door, leaving him utterly struck by her allure. She introduced herself and he was instantly smitten. Stephen believed he sensed reciprocal interest from Rhonda, though he couldn't be sure if it was wishful thinking on his part. Never considering himself a handsome man, Stephen believed his intelligence was his most appealing feature and that this attracted Rhonda. Whatever her reasons, Rhonda responded to Stephen's advances and soon moved into the condo, not as a roommate of her mother's but as Stephen's girlfriend. Stephen wasn't content with just having Rhonda's affection within 3 months of meeting her. He also developed feelings for Melanie, her sister who was still underage at the time. His infidelity remained hidden, and by February 2008, although they hadn't married, Stephen and Rhonda became parents to a daughter they named Ava. In the meantime, Julia relocated to another condo. Fully committed to motherhood, Rhonda lavished Ava with love. However, she was not immune to the postpartum depression that affects a considerable number of women. Rhonda was particularly distressed about the weight she had gained during her pregnancy, which posed a challenge to restarting her modeling career. Additionally, Stephen's prolonged absences and hesitancy to propose added to her emotional burden, causing her to feel neglected. Consequently, the relationship between the two began to deteriorate. Rhonda's close friend, Jessica, knew about Stephen's infidelity and even asserted that he was physically abusive to Rhonda. Despite this, Rhonda tried to maintain the relationship for the sake of her daughter, Ava. Towards the end of 2008, both Stephen and Rhonda took out life insurance policies, naming each other as beneficiaries, with Ava listed as a contingent beneficiary. In early 2009, Stephen decided to increase his insurance coverage to $1 million around the same time. Rhonda resolved to return to her modeling career, recognizing the need to improve her physical condition first. Stephen suggested they go on a hike at Eagle Creek, a popular but potentially dangerous trail in the Columbia River Gorge. Rhonda informed Julia of their plans and asked her to care for Ava for the day. Before leaving, Rhonda made a lighthearted but eerie comment to her mother about the possibility of being murdered. She thought Stephen had planned the hike as a romantic setting to propose to her, or he had darker intentions such as pushing her off a cliff. On the morning of March 16, 2009, the couple woke up early, left their daughter Ava with Julia, and began their hike. Rhonda captured the start of their outing with a photo of Stephen. However, the trip was cut short under mysterious circumstances. While ascending the slippery and moss-covered Eagle Creek Trail, they faced several challenges. The inconsistent weather made the trail wet and treacherous. They reached a particularly narrow part of the trail, where only one person could pass at a time. What transpired next remains an enigma known only to the couple. According to Stephen's account, Rhonda was in a playful mood and had jokingly draped a towel over her shoulders, dubbing herself Supergirl. She started running and then slipped, falling from a height of over 150 feet. Stephen claimed that he spent an hour looking for her through rain-soaked terrain. When he finally found her and attempted CPR, he collapsed from exhaustion. Back at home, Julia grew increasingly anxious as the day wore on. Eventually, Stephen awoke, but with no cell service to call for assistance, he made his way back to the trailhead. Around 6 p.m., he finally reached his car and called 911. Rescue arrived roughly an hour later, determining Rhonda's injuries to be consistent with a fall. Her death was initially ruled an accident. In the aftermath, Julia received a visit from a chaplain sent by the local fire department, who regretfully informed her that her daughter was gone forever. In the days that followed, Rhonda's family and friends gathered to pay their last respects at her funeral. To Julia, Stephen's behavior during the ordeal seemed unusually detached and lacking in genuine grief. Although media coverage of the incident in February 2009 was sparse, initial reports suggested that the police didn't suspect foul play. Despite this, county detectives took their investigation very seriously and began to scrutinize Stephen's account more closely. Julia's persistent insistence, driven by her hope of accusing Stephen of her daughter's murder, also played a pivotal role in prompting a more in-depth investigation. Stephen cooperated fully during police questioning. The forensic examiner reported that most of Rhonda's injuries were below the waist and also found traces of various prescription medications for anxiety and depression in her system. While authorities stopped short of definitively ruling Rhonda's death as an accident, Stephen was not charged with any crime. Shortly thereafter, he moved to another part of the state, taking Ava with him. Surprisingly, less than 6 months after Rhonda's death, Stephen faced charges for sexually abusing a 13-year-old girl, allegations he has consistently denied. His legal troubles persisted when he attempted to claim Rhonda's life insurance money. The insurance company refused the payout, arguing that the policy was void due to inaccuracies in the application. Furthermore, it remained uncertain whether Stephen, as the policy's beneficiary, might have been involved in Rhonda's death. If so, he could be ineligible for the payout under Oregon law. A federal district judge later ruled that the $1 million should be placed in an interest-bearing account under court control. The insurance company's lawyers agreed that the money would go to the couple's daughter once she reached adulthood. Stephen's insistence on claiming the life insurance money only deepened suspicions about him, providing Julia with what she believed to be clear evidence of his ulterior, financially motivated motives for allegedly murdering Rhonda. The legal process wasn't progressing as quickly as Rhonda's mother had hoped. 4 years after the incidents in 2013, Stephen still had not faced any charges. Eager for a fresh start, he relocated to a distant yet familiar place, China. In this far-off but now recognizable setting, he moved to Wuxi, situated 120 kilometers from Shanghai. Here, he found employment as an English teacher for Chinese business professionals. According to his own account, Eva acclimated seamlessly, mastering Mandarin in just 2 months. Besides being fluent in Mandarin, she participated in dance courses, took Taekwondo training, and started learning the piano. Progress was evident for Stephen as well, as he found love once more. Back in the United States, investigators were continuously working on Rhonda's case, unbeknownst to Stephen. Julia, for her part, maintained his guilt and pressed the authorities. Then, in a turn of events that caught everyone off guard, true crime writer Stephen Jackson entered the picture in April 2014 and set things in motion. A grand jury reviewed the evidence and covertly indicted Stephen for murder. All the while, he remained in China, completely unaware of the judicial trap being set more than 11,000 kilometers away. The relationship between Stephen and his new partner, Landy, was growing stronger to the extent that Landy had stepped into a maternal role for Ava. Within less than a year, Stephen proposed to Landy and she said yes. The couple planned to have 2 wedding ceremonies, one in the United States and another in China. To initiate their plans, Stephen and Ava flew to the U.S. in February 2015, with Landy set to join them shortly thereafter. However, upon their arrival in San Francisco, airport personnel informed Stephen that there was an issue with his luggage. Instead of continuing on to his connecting flight to Oregon, Stephen was separated from Ava and taken into custody by detectives from San Mateo County, California. They interrogated him about Rhonda's death, but he declined to discuss the matter. Despite his reticence, the questioning persisted for about 3 hours. Stephen was subsequently extradited to Oregon while Ava was placed in the care of Rhonda's family. Right after his arrest for murder, Stephen was charged with 2 counts of rape in the 3rd degree and 3 counts of rape in the 4th degree and 3 counts of 3rd-degree sodomy for allegedly engaging in sexual intercourse with Melanie, his sister-in-law, when she was a minor. Once again, Stephen denied all accusations and entered a not guilty plea. His attorney highlighted the unconstitutional nature of the 3-hour police questioning. The defense even assembled their own team of investigators to visit Eagle Creek Trail, aiming to demonstrate that Rhonda's death was the result of an accidental fall. During this period, Stephen faced various pretrial hearings that delved into multiple issues, including the available evidence and the motive behind Rhonda's death. The defense argued that her death had been an accident, raising questions about the necessity of a trial. On the other side, law enforcement revisited the site where Rhonda fell and conducted an unusual test using crash test dummies matching her size and weight to explore the theory that she had been pushed. Despite mounting pressure, Stephen remained resolute in his denial of guilt, maintaining that he had genuinely loved Rhonda. In August 2015, he attended a bail hearing. His lawyer, Arnold, scrutinized the scientific validity of the tests surrounding Rhonda's fall and centered the defense on the notion that her death had been a tragic accident. Arnold emphasized that Rhonda was the 4th fatality on that particular trail in just 6 months, arguing that similar incidents were more common than most people believed. Christopher, the forensic doctor, testified that Rhonda's severe injuries were all below her waist, suggesting she had primarily landed on her legs and pelvis. Arnold interpreted this as evidence that Rhonda had slipped feet first. If she had been pushed, the injuries would have been more widespread across her body. However, Julia countered these arguments by stating that Stephen had ample motive to harm her daughter, accusing him of being both abusive and unfaithful. A bail amount of $2 million was set, and Stephen, unable to secure this sum, returned to jail. Meanwhile, Jessica mustered the courage to visit the location where her best friend Rhonda had fallen for the first time. By May 2017, after numerous hearings debating the admissibility of evidence, including Stephen's admission of a sexual relationship with Melanie, it seemed that his long-awaited trial was approaching. But in a twist that shocked and disappointed Rhonda's loved ones, a settlement conference led to a surprising outcome. The prosecution and defense reached an agreement allowing Stephen to plead guilty to lesser charges. specifically criminal negligent homicide and coercion, thereby removing the murder charge from the equation. The assistant county prosecutor acknowledged that while they believed Stephen was guilty, the challenge lay in the lack of adequate evidence to bring before a jury. To secure a murder conviction, the prosecution needed to demonstrate Stephen's intent in causing Rhonda's death. As defense attorney Arnold emphasized, there was a dearth of concrete evidence, only vague hints and conjectures, complicating matters further. A significant amount of evidence was lost when the detective handling the case retired and wiped his computer files. This development was a devastating blow for Julia, who was left angry and frustrated. Jessica was also in disbelief, seeing it as a glaring gap in the justice system. Arnold consistently defended his client, arguing that innocent individuals often enter guilty pleas to achieve a particular outcome. He stated that dropping the charges enabled Stephen to continue pursuing custody of his daughter, Ava. The defense was aware of various issues plaguing the juvenile court system, where delays could significantly impede a child's reunion with their parents. Stephen himself confirmed that this was the sole reason he agreed to the deal. He received credit for time already served and was placed on a 3-year probation. His ankle monitor was removed, effectively ending his time in incarceration. Back on the streets, he remained concerned about the situation with Ava. But in 2018, in an explosive television interview, Stephen admitted for the first time to behaving inappropriately with a minor and also acknowledged having sexual relations with Melanie. "And you had sex with Melanie?" "Correct. What were you thinking?" "I wasn't. It was a very stupid decision." When questioned about killing one sister to be with the other, he remained evasive, even defiant. Moreover, he told a news story on camera stating that Rhonda didn't slip, but due to postpartum depression, took her own life. Would lead people to think that you killed one sister to be with the other sister. You can believe whatever you want. Some people are gonna believe that I'm innocent. Some are gonna think I'm guilty. And believe what you want to believe. Julia reacted strongly to his claims, asserting that despite the medication her daughter was on, Rhonda would have been incapable of making such a decision, especially considering how much she loved Ava. However, this turn of events further complicated Stephen's quest to regain custody of his daughter. Adding another layer of complexity to the already intricate case, Julia was sentenced to 30 days in a rehab facility and received a 3-year probation term after admitting to unlawfully claiming $39,124 in Social Security benefits meant for her granddaughter. She was also mandated to repay the sum. While some reports suggest that a $20.18 ruling terminated Stephen's parental rights and placed Ava in foster care, there is no official confirmation of this. Meanwhile, the insurance payout from her mother's policy remains in a bank account, set to be accessible when Ava turns 18. Currently a teenager, Ava continues to be under state care. Two-year-old Jacob Gabriel Hoggle and his sister, 3-year-old Sarah Grace Hoggle, went missing on September 7, 2014 at the hands of their mother, Catherine Ashley Hoggle. Catherine had suffered from mental illness since childhood and was eventually diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. In August 2013, she was involuntarily committed to a psychiatric hospital and placed on medication. After her release from the hospital, Catherine moved first to a group home and then back in with Troy Turner, her children's father. Troy states that he did not know of her mental illness history until after they had children. She was enrolled in a day treatment program and her family had agreed that she wouldn't be allowed to spend much time along with the children, Sarah, Jacob, and their older 6-year-old son. On September 7, 2014, while Troy was at work, Catherine and the children were at her parents' house. At 4 p.m., Catherine borrowed her father's vehicle and told her parents she was going to take Jacob to get some pizza. She returned without Jacob and said she'd left him at one of her other son's friends' homes. Jacob had not, in fact, been left at the friend's house, but her family initially believed the story. In addition, Catherine is described as being a very manipulative and convincing person. Catherine's parents took her and her oldest son back to her and Troy's house. Troy arrived home from work at midnight and Catherine was sitting on the front porch. She asked him to drive her to the nearby store to get a Dr. Pepper. He agreed, leaving the kids at home asleep. At this point, Troy does not know that his 2-year-old son Jacob is missing and not inside the home. He states he normally checks in on the kids before going to bed, but after returning home from the store he was exhausted, feared waking them, and went straight to bed. The next morning when Troy woke up, he realized only he and his oldest son were home. Catherine, Sarah, and Jacob were gone. After their oldest son was getting on the school bus that morning, Troy, very concerned, dialed 911. But at that point Catherine drove up and told him she had taken both Sarah and Jacob to a daycare center in Germantown, Maryland, which he initially believed. He then told the 911 that it was a false alarm. Troy then dropped Catherine off at her day treatment program and returned to pick her up at 2 p.m. and suggested to her they pick up the children from the daycare. She then strangely told him that she couldn't remember the name of the daycare center, the phone number, or exactly where it was. Troy then told her he was going to the police. She asked if they could stop at a Chick-fil-A restaurant to get a drink and that she would then direct him to the daycare. When they went into the restaurant, she got a drink and then she said she was going to the counter to get a refill. Troy said he would meet her out in the car and then they would go get the kids. Catherine then went to the bathroom and tried calling a cab, but then ran out another door and disappeared. For days later, Catherine was seen walking along down the street in Germantown, Maryland, wearing the same clothes on her that had been posted with her and the children's faces on it. When police asked her where the children were, she at first said she had left them with an old high school friend named Aaron, then led the police to a playground in Germantown and said she had abandoned both children there. She was arrested, charged with misdemeanor counts of parental abduction, neglect, and hindering a police investigation, and then was committed to Clifton T. Perkins Hospital Center, a maximum security psychiatric hospital in Jessup, Maryland. Doctors would evaluate her and find that she was incompetent to stand trial. Catherine has been in the hospital ever since, but she has yet to be deemed competent. Troy and her family describe her as a highly intelligent woman and believe she may be faking mental illness to escape the consequences of her actions. A person who is charged with misdemeanors and deemed mentally incompetent to stand trial can only be held for a maximum of 3 years. If they are charged with felonies, they can be held for an additional 5 years. In September 2017, 3 years after Sarah and Jacob disappeared, Catherine was charged with 2 counts of murder. She is still in the psychiatric hospital and still has to be deemed competent before she can stand trial. In 2019, the prosecution retained another psychiatrist to provide a second opinion on Catherine's competency. As for the past several years, the doctors at Clifton T. Perkins Hospital had been saying she was incompetent, but her condition was improving and she might become competent someday. The second opinion doctor agreed with the hospital's doctors. She also believed Catherine was mentally unfit for trial. Investigators also believed that Catherine had plans to take her oldest son that day and murder him as well. Thankfully, she never got the chance. Although police believe Catherine murdered her children, there is no evidence to indicate their whereabouts. She has told the staff at the hospital that her children are safe, but she continues to refuse to reveal their location. Their cases remain unsolved and foul play is suspected due to the circumstances involved. Michelle Lee Rust was a graduate of Lansdowne High School. She sang in the choir and helped with children's programs at Hallathorpe Community Church. She was 24 years old when she was last seen at her home on Clark Boulevard in Hayworth, Maryland at 9:30 a.m. on July 20, 2002. She was planning on going to town to buy some items for her 3-year-old son's birthday party. Her husband said he saw her van rounding the bend on a road headed to town, but didn't see if she was for sure the one driving. 30 minutes later, he became concerned that she hadn't returned and began calling family members. At 11 a.m., an hour and a half later, her father-in-law found her dark green 1998 Dodge Caravan abandoned. It was parked in front of a row of houses on Zion Avenue near the corner of Clyde Avenue and an entrance to Hillcrest Park and the nearby residential community of Lansdowne. It is said that her husband was very familiar with this area as he and other athletes in high school used to park in the exact location. The entry key was broken off in the driver's door keyhole and the rest of the keychain was missing. There was no sign of Michelle or her belongings at the scene. It was first believed that she disappeared while going to the store to buy supplies for the party. However, interviews with various witnesses have determined that no one saw her actually leave her house. Her parents think she is dead and believe she was abducted before reaching the end of the street and possibly before leaving her residence. There has been no activity on her bank account since her disappearance. Her credit cards disappeared with her but have not been used since she vanished. She had worked at a children's daycare facility before becoming a stay-at-home mother. Her family says it is extremely uncharacteristic of her to leave without warning. Authorities have not ruled out her husband as a suspect, but they have not ruled out anyone else either, except Michelle's parents. Her husband was the last person to see his wife before she vanished. He had reportedly been having multiple extramarital affairs, and Michelle was afraid that one of his girlfriends might hurt her. He had a history of multiple domestic violence assaults, and it is said that Michelle confronted him about his affairs the day before her disappearance. Her husband began dating Michelle when she was a freshman in high school and married her in 1997. He maintains his innocence in his wife's disappearance and states he does not believe she left of her own free will. He filed for divorce from Michelle in February 2007 and sought custody of their son, and eventually married one of the women that he was having an affair with. Family members say that Michelle loved her 3-year-old son and would not have disappeared on her own, leaving the child behind. She is also a diabetic and dependent on insulin. Her disappearance is still being investigated as a kidnapping by the FBI, and foul play is suspected. As of today, the case remains unsolved. 28-year-old Marilyn Jazz Scott was born on August 27, 1988. She was a staff sergeant in the Air National Guard and was 3 months pregnant when she was murdered in cold blood. She was found on February 7, 2017 outside her apartment at Clark's Ridge Court just before 6 a.m. in Bel Air, Maryland. Marilyn's body was found lying next to her car, a black Honda Accord, keys still in hand, suggesting she was following her normal routine that morning when she was ambushed. The crime scene revealed that she was heading down to start her car for her 50-minute commute to Newcastle's Air National Guard offices when shots rang out, alerting neighbors to the tragedy. Marilyn was shot in the chest and head. Marilyn loved seeing other people happy, her mother said. She would always reserve restaurants for birthdays and holidays. She never forgot an event. Marilyn loved to buy presents for her family and friends and always spent more on others than she did herself. To her family, Marilyn was extraordinary and had a radiant personality, smart and driven to accomplish things. She was incredibly independent. She never needed anyone else's help. Her sister, Paris Scott, said, Marilyn ran track in high school and college. Through scholarships alone, she paid her way through college at Coppin State University in Baltimore, where she earned her bachelor's degree in English. She later enlisted in the Air National Guard, where she worked her way up to the rank of staff sergeant with her sights set on becoming an officer. While there have been speculations as to who was responsible for taking Marilyn's life, the police maintain that there is not enough evidence to prosecute. Although, she had called the police after a break-in at her residence where nothing was taken just days prior to her murder. Marilyn's mother, Brenda Ruffin, believes the suspect in her daughter's murder is not behind bars. She worries that the longer they aren't held accountable, the more opportunities they will have to do terrible things. Hartford County detectives say after taking their investigation out of state, they've narrowed down their search on who they think killed Marilyn, but they just don't have enough evidence to link the suspect to the crime. As of today, this case remains unsolved. "23-year-old Bernadette Stevenson Caruso was last seen leaving Shaw's jewelry store at East Point Mall in Baltimore, Maryland on September 27, 1986. Bernadette's shift ended at 5 p.m. at the jewelry store and was seen getting in her car in the mall's parking lot at 5:05 p.m. She had told a coworker that her estranged husband had called her, and she was going to meet him to discuss something. Bernadette had planned to spend the evening with Jill Kelly, another of Shaw's employees and a close friend of hers since high school, but Jill never heard from Bernadette that night. Her disappearance went unnoticed until the next night when her husband showed up to her home in Carrollwood, Maryland, to return their daughter. When she didn't answer the door, He called Bernadette's mother, Patricia Stevenson, and stated Bernadette wasn't around, so he would just keep their daughter until she turned up. Patricia knew immediately something was wrong. She then summoned Bernadette's 6 siblings and they began searching. The vehicle she was driving was her grandmother's gray and green 1982 Chevrolet Cavalier with Maryland license tags numbered, and it has never been recovered. It has been said that recovering her car will be the crucial lead in finding out what happened to her. Bernadette was separated from her husband, a Baltimore County police officer at the time of her disappearance. They were involved in a bitter custody battle over their then 3-year-old daughter, Nicole. Their daughter was spending the weekend with relatives on the day Bernadette vanished. Her husband was later fired from the police department after being convicted of abusing a prisoner. Witnesses report that he often threatened his wife and she had filed a domestic violence charge against him. He has not been charged in her case, however, nor has he or anyone else been named a suspect. Some time ago, a tip was called in on Bernadette's case mentioning a body of water in eastern Baltimore County. This area was originally checked by police and divers when Bernadette first disappeared in the 1980s, but was ruled out when tag numbers of vehicles in the water did not match Bernadette's car. The original vehicles discovered were never removed from the water. Due to information uncovered in February 2008, her family believes this area needs to be reinvestigated with modern water sonar technology that may prove beneficial in uncovering clues in Bernadette's disappearance. However, the police department has stated their budget cannot afford this equipment. Therefore, her family has asked for help to thoroughly check this body of water. Divers desperately need this piece of equipment, as well as a crane and the service of a flatbed towing company to remove all vehicles found under this water. Police have stated that there isn't enough evidence to bring her case to trial because her body hasn't been located, which has been very frustrating to her family. Bernadette's husband was granted a divorce and has since remarried. Nicole grew up with her father and stepmother and has had little contact with her mother's family. Foul play is suspected in Bernadette's disappearance due to the circumstances involved. Her loved ones describe her disappearance as uncharacteristic of her, and they believe she was met with harm. As of today, her case remains unsolved. George Stanley Burdinsky Jr. was born on July 29, 1982, and went by the name Jr. He was a student at Thomas Stone Elementary School and lived with his parents Barbara and George Burdinsky and his younger sister Virginia. His mother told authorities that he left their home at the 4300 block of 40th Place in Brentwood, Maryland around 3:30 p.m. on May 24, 1993. 10-year-old George was planning on riding his bike to meet an adult friend, Robert Violet, at his home in the 4500 block of 37th Street. Robert stated that Jr. never arrived, but witnesses said that they saw Jr. in front of Robert's mother's residence at 4 p.m. Jr. was last seen biking around the neighborhood at approximately 8:30 p.m. that evening. He has never been heard from again. Jr. was riding his small red bicycle that was missing its rear fender and had a spare rim tied around the handlebars at the time of his disappearance. His father and Robert searched for Jr. the following morning and discovered the bicycle rim near a tennis court 3 blocks from the family's residence. There was no sign of Jr. at the scene, and his bicycle has never been recovered. Jr.'s disappearance led to the most extensive search in Prince George's County history. While it never located Jr., the investigation did uncover a child sex abuse ring that stunned the community. Police learned that 6 young boys were molested in a home just 2 miles from where the Burdinskys lived. The lead in Jr.'s case involved 2 suspects who were connected to a child exploitation ring in the mid-Atlantic United States. The FBI discovered that the suspects utilized the internet to further their child pornography ventures. The individuals, homeowner James Kowalski and his renter and co-worker, Stephen Leake, occasionally referred to as Bruce Leake, and Joseph Lynch, were never charged in connection with Jr.'s disappearance. But the FBI did begin an investigation focused on internet child exploitation because of the failed lead. In 1994, the FBI launched the Innocent Images National Initiative, which works to prosecute suspected child pornographers on the web. Jr.'s mother testified at Lynch's trial saying that her son visited Lynch's home in the 3200 block of Barnum Street with his friends in 1993. Authorities believe that Kowalski, Leake, and Lynch abused 2 of Jr.'s friends the weekend prior to his disappearance. Kowalski stated that he was not aware of Junior's disappearance, but investigators made a chilling discovery that he had videotaped news footage of his case at his home. In addition, there was proof that Junior had logged onto a computer there to play a video game. Junior's parents stated that Kowalski had taken their son on at least 2 all-day excursions, including a water park, and then returning to his home. Kowalski was the molester of the children while Leak recorded the acts. Nearly 700 pictures were seized from the Hyattsville home, many of them showing young boys. Police also seized 3,200 videotapes. 6 weeks before Junior's disappearance, Kowalski moved from Hyattsville, Maryland to Winchester, Virginia, where investigators discovered sexually explicit diaries. At the time, in 1993, a police spokeswoman piece of information that we don't mind sharing that we have obtained from the floppy disks is some detailed accounts of his visits to Costa Rica and the little boys that he encountered there and what he did with them. What did he do with them? Paid them for sex. Numbers of them. The 3 men were eventually convicted of child abuse unrelated to Junior's case. Kowalski and Leak are still incarcerated, but Lynch has been released. Police say the 2 men befriended young boys, gave them gifts, and invited them into their home. Then they sexually abused them, often videotaping the criminal acts. Kowalski is currently serving more than 200 years in prison. Over the years, investigators checked out hundreds of leads. Among them, the discovery of what appeared to be a shallow grave in a Cottage City neighborhood park about a mile from the Burdisky home. But Junior's body wasn't there. Investigators announced in March 2002 that they were focusing on another individual whom they believe may have murdered Junior in 1993. Authorities have not publicly named the suspect as the case is still under investigation. The information received by investigators reportedly does not involve any of the convicted child molesters. In June 1993, a Brentwood woman was charged with lying to investigators about the last time she saw Junior. Gloria Pettit was a neighbor of Junior's and was a lifelong friend of James Kowalski. Detective James White, a police spokesman, said that timing is critical in helping detectives retrace the hours leading up to Junior's disappearance. Strangely, Kowalski is also accused of molesting Gloria's 9 and 11-year-old sons and another 13-year-old boy in Brentwood. Kowalski pleaded guilty to molesting one of Gloria's sons and 2 of Junior's friends and videotaping the acts. At one point, he faced 84 counts of child abuse and pornography involving 6 of Junior's friends. Gloria later sued Kowalski seeking $4 million in damages. Kowalski was also the children's godfather. Junior's parents stated that Gloria often introduced Kowalski to Brentwood residents and their children. Kowalski testified in 1994 that he had an uncontrollable urge to molest children and attempted to declare he was insane, but that claim was rejected by the jury. Kowalski told jurors that he recognized his sexual attraction to boys at an early age and had his first sexual encounter at age 13 with a younger boy. Kowalski was unapologetic in describing his sexual relationships with more than 20 boys, including child prostitutes on trips to Costa Rica and Puerto Rico. In February 2004, there were reported sightings of Junior in Boston and Northborough, Massachusetts. Witnesses recognized him by the scar on his face and said he appeared to be homeless. He may have been with a group of people selling magazines or coupon books door to door. 2 detectives from Brentwood traveled to Massachusetts to investigate the sightings, but they were unable to locate the individual or determine whether it was Junior. He has never been identified. As of today, this case remains unsolved. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.